Hey guys, Dilby here, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm walking you through my new track, Oud Wood, which is out now on Bondage music. I think this one's a little bit different to some of the tracks that I've shown you on the channel before, so probably going to be quite interesting. There's a lot of like subtle, intricate, detailed techniques in there. This is a really groove-based track, so you're going to see how I use lots of pretty simple elements to build up a really rolling, kind of chugging, hypnotic groove. I'm loving this track myself. I've been playing it out a lot. There's a link in the description to Beatport and Spotify if you want to go and check this out, and the whole EP actually. There's also a killer remix from my buddy Sasha Dive. And as a special treat, I'm going to be dropping a stripped back version of the project files from this on Patreon. Link in the description to Patreon. It's one of the best ways that you can support the channel. Now let's get into Ableton and see how I made this bad boy. Alright, so here we are inside Ableton. This is the project files for Oud Wood, out now on Bondage music. This is actually the third time I've recorded this video, so please drop a thumbs up in the video and pray for me in the comments. So first thing I will address is this does not have any reference tracks in this project, which I was quite surprised at. So normally in my projects, I would always have some kind of reference track. Now I think the reason for this is I did this as part of a EP for Bondage music, right? So I think happened, if I remember correctly, is I kind of did a bunch of sketches, I think maybe 6, and then chose the best ones to kind of finish and complete and make the EP. So normally I would have reference tracks, but I think I probably kind of just was on a bit of a roll and had some ideas. I do remember from looking through the project where the inspiration point came from, or like kind of like, let's say maybe like the main bit, or yeah, the starting point was actually this audio loop. So if I go show in browser, you know, if you're familiar with the song or you recognize it from listening in the intro, that's an important part of the track, and that was the kind of the starting point of the track. But we'll get to that. Let's go through from the start and look at how it's built up. So we'll start with the kick, just a simple 4/4 kick pattern. So interestingly enough, the kick is one of my kicks from Underground Shades of House Volume 2. That's my new sample pack on House of Loop. And I think I've used actually a few bits from that throughout this project. One of the really important things for me when I was making that sample pack was that I wanted it to be really usable. And that worked out well for me because I've been using it a lot. Anyway, so what I've done here is basically just pumped up a little bit on the highs to make the click come through. So it's very, very subtle. It's actually, I mean, it's 3 dB, but it's just like, I think it's just more of an in the mix thing that it just kind of, I just wanted that click to punch through a little bit more. It's basically just accentuating the transients. So if we look at Oscillos Megascope here, that's how we are. And then if I turn that off, you can see this transient bit at the start is just a little bit lower. So yeah, it just helps it punch through in the mix a tiny bit. But other than that, nothing else. Other than in these pink parts, I'm automating this filter rack on and off. So we get the effect of the low end being cut out. Nice. Then basically I take that and I duplicate I just kind of drag and drop it onto the bass channel here and do the same thing. So I normally do the kick first and then drag and drop it on here, so I don't have to go in and remake all these fiddly little automations. It's kind of part of my arrangement process. Anyway, let's have a look at the claps. We've got one clap here. Looks like I've chopped it from somewhere, maybe from a loop. And a nice kind of like drum machine style 909 clap. Actually kind of like a similar sound source, but this one I've put a little bit back in the mix by creating some width with the Haas effect here. And then it's a bit lower in volume. So it's just creating that nice kind of stereo feeling for the claps. Each of them has a bit of clipping on it, a little bit more clipping here. And then some reverb. This is my kind of default clap reverb. And I've got the dry wet set to 19, which is quite low, so it's pretty subtle. So nice kick and clap combo there. Now in the hats, pretty simple stuff again. We've got this open hat, a shaker, So you can hear this one's got a bit more of a transient, and this one's got a very kind of gradual attack. So they sit together quite nicely. We've got a closed hat here. This is giving it a little bit of a disco vibe. It's like accentuated downbeat and then the offbeat hat. It's not really a disco vibe, but you know, it's something that's done in disco music. So let's take a listen to that and the kick and the clap. So that's further helping to accentuate the transient on the kick essentially as well. We've got a 16th hat, pretty low in the mix, I believe. So it just really helps to kind of pick up the pace, add some good energy. We're at 125 BPM, which is, you know, moderately paced, not super fast by current standards. And then I've got this shaker. So I'm essentially using it in the same way as you might use a ride or something, basically just to add some more energy by introducing more high frequency information. Very subtle. And then I've got this breakbeat loop. Now the breakbeat loop's really important for this. The drums sound, in my opinion anyway, pretty good, but they're nothing particularly special. So the breakbeat loop adds in some kind of personality, I feel like. Good stuff. So basically not much processing or anything going on in here. I'm just taking out a bit of the highs as I've already got quite a lot of high information stuff going on in the hi-hats, and I'm using this auto filter here to introduce it and then also to like take it away in the break. Nice one. And let's have a look at the bass. So the bass is coming from Diva. If you've watched any of my other walkthrough videos, you know I use Diva pretty extensively. It's one of my own presets. I have here user presets. Like I have a bunch of different kind of go-to presets, kind of like as starting points for a lot of my sounds. They're just things that work well for me. I might use like one or two in a track. Sometimes I'll like modify them or layer them with other things so that it doesn't get stale between all of my tracks, but I'll kind of like, it also helps to create some consistency and really speed things up. I might also at the end go through and switch out some sounds if I feel like I've used too many of my go-to sounds, but it does help me to like get ideas down quickly and write fast. So we've got two oscillators here. We've got a sub, which is a sawtooth, and an upper octave, which is also a sawtooth. And then I'm using this to pull it down by 1 octave. So this is how the MIDI looks. You can see we've got a little bit of velocity information there. It's essentially like a very simple bass pattern, very kind of regular standard stuff. A kind of maybe a more simplified version would be something like this. We've got the offbeat, and then maybe, yeah, you know, that kind of might have even been my starting point. I'll just color that differently and then we'll throw it back in. Hear how that sounds. So it's a very kind of familiar groove, but I just try to switch things up a little bit. Often I'll use like octaves and things to do that as well. So I like those kind of consistent, familiar grooves, but then I just try to modify them like one step to the left or right. Now, this velocity information is interesting because the bass has got a pretty consistent volume. But what I'm doing with that velocity information in Diva, it is changing the volume of each note and it's influencing a little bit of the filter modulation. But then I've got this L2 limiter to kind of push down the louder notes and pull up the quieter notes to create a more consistent volume. This is quite heavy compression and this is influencing the sound more. So basically what I'm getting is just more texture in the bass, in the sound of the bass. So it just kind of helps to make the bass feel a little more alive, essentially. When you're doing something like this, you do want to be kind of careful not to add too much compression, because you can kind of kill the transients, or you can just create really bad sounding distortion. So subtlety is key. All right, now let's have a look at the melodic elements here. So first up, let's look at this deep chord. So a nice kind of organ type of sound coming from Diva. And we can see again, I'm using this volume randomization to make sure that each time it plays, it sounds slightly different. That's something that's really important in my tracks, is just creating subtle movement or subtle difference in an element. I don't often have elements that sound exactly the same all the way through. Sometimes I do, but for the most part, I try to kind of keep things changing up subtly. And it just helps to, all those things add up and make the track feel a little more alive. So let's have a look at the MIDI for that. Pretty much based on the D sharp minor triad chord, but I've just inverted these notes down. So what we're doing with this and this organ pluck is creating some kind of call and response. Right, so it's kind of two different organ-y type sounds. They're similar sounds but different, and they're working together to create like a bit of a groove going on here. Okay, we've also got this groove accent, which is essentially based on the bass. You can see here, there's the bass MIDI, and here's the MIDI. So these two are happening in the bass as well. So it's just kind of doing exactly what it says, really. Groove accent. It's accenting some of the groove from the bass and just adding kind of more texture to that. And then with these elements here, it's just helping to build up this call and response. We've got this kind of familiar groove, but I'm just accenting different sounds onto different parts of that groove. So those are really important parts of the groove. Now let's have a look at this main riff, which I showed you earlier. I've basically taken this sample, which was an F minor. I've pitched it down by 2 semitones to be in D sharp minor, which is the key of the track. And I've cut out a couple of the riffs using the volume automation on this clip so that I've only got the parts that I need. Now, what I've done is I've duplicated the notes, or replayed the notes, and I've got this Diva rack here. This is how the original sounds. So this is more high frequency. This is giving it a bit more body, kind of allowing this riff to take up more space and be a bit more powerful. You can see in the arrangement here, I kind of let quite a lot of the track happen before this riff kind of is introduced as the main riff. So I do introduce it here. But I'm kind of slowly bringing it in with this filter automation, and then it leaves again. So we go back to the groove. Then introducing it again where it kind of lasts for the remainder of the track. Now it's got a lot of automation going on. You can see filter automation here. On this Diva, I've got this LFO, which is modulating the resonance. And this is again another way of making sure each time this plays, that it's sounding slightly different. Again, we've got some velocity randomization, not doing too much, which is impacting the envelope amount and also directly the cutoff here. Now I've taken out a bit of the highs, basically because this resonance is really strong. I just wanted to kind of control that a little bit. We've got some delay in that auto filter, and that auto filter is duplicated across both of these. Now on this group, I've got a big old reverb, a big shimmer reverb. So that's just helping to kind of create all this space and atmosphere, especially here at the end of this main break. And then that kind of comes away, right? So it kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then as the low end comes back, it tightens up again. It creates contrast between that break and that drop. I've got another here, which is a digital delay, and I've used this macro group to create one knob where I can automate the level of both of these delay taps. So that's just increasing this delay to, again, create this kind of tension and release. I'm also sending this to another delay, just basically using that automation to create more intensity. Now, you don't need these emulations of a couple of hardware units, but you could use Valhalla Shimmer, and you could basically just use the Ableton delay or echo for that. Now, next up, I've got this dub stab. So this is like a classic Dilby sound, I would say, something I use in a lot of tracks, this type of thing, and it's basically accentuating the end of the 2-bar section. It's emulating what's happening in the bass line. So again, sticking to that same groove that we've implemented from the start and just reinforcing it. Alright, so it's adding another texture and just accentuating this last note of the 2-bar section. We've got 2 sounds here. That's like a really nice kind of distorted, sounds like it's being run through a guitar pedal or something like that. And there we've got a bit more body. So those two are working together nicely. And that's, I think, something that's really important when you're layering things. Don't just do it for the sake of it, like do it with intention and do it with sounds that complement each other. So there's a reason why both of those sounds are used together. Now we've got 2 more groups, one called glitch and one called pads. Let's have a look at this glitch one. Basically, this is just a sample. Very nice, kind of fitting with the vibe of the track. And I'm just kind of using this sporadically throughout to basically ear candy. I've got this EFX refract on it, which is adding a bit of chorus and a bit of bandpass filtering. So it's just really sound design. I've got this riff top. So this is coming from Diva. Nice glitchy sound using Tantra. It's without Tantra. So we're using the LFO modulator again to influence this auto filter with a lot of resonance. If I pull this resonance down, a bit more tame. And this is the patch. It's got a lot of resonance also in here. Alright, so adding up all that resonance is really important for the sound, and then the Tantra is like helping to add a bit more glitch and personality, but it's quite subtle, quite low in the mix. So this is how it sounds in context. It's also based on the bass line, so it's just, again, reinforcing that groove. Now we've got this sequence. So this is an arpeggio. Now it's got 2 different chords here, the D and the G, then D up an octave and the A sharp. And it's an arpeggio preset from Diva, and then I'm using this Filter Freak with dual bandpass filters, which are kind of doing this sweeping motion so that each time it plays it sounds different, but again it's kind of giving it this resonant sound. Helps to sit it back in the mix, but also helps to give it a bit more character and personality. So again, it's a subtle element in the context of the track. It is adding something to the track. But it's kind of ear candy. So those are the glitch elements. Then in the pad section, I've got this deep pad, which is basically just like an atmospheric thing happening in the background. I'm using some volume automation to bring it in slowly from the start and bring it out at the end as the track is kind of thinned out in those spaces. So if I have it at full volume, the pad feels a bit overbearing. This is really subtle stuff. It's just atmospheric, basically. Just helps to kind of give the track this kind of deep house vibe, right? I've got this stutter pad. So this is just a sample. Go show in browser. So it's cool like that basically, but I'm using the controls on this EQ to create it into more of like a sweep. So it's really helping as a kind of transitional element. And then we've got two more pad elements. We've got this string. Again, using the volume automation just to increase it in intensity as we build into this break and then towards the drop. And then I've got this phase opener pad, which is just a kind of like phasey Juno sample by the sounds of it. So the kind of phasey resonant sound, it just fits with a bunch of these other like resonant and glitchy sounds in the track and helps to give it a bit of personality. It's also like these pads are all sitting in different parts of the frequency spectrum and have like different sound characteristics. So they all fit quite well together. So there, that is another example of what I was saying before about layering, that you want to have sounds that complement each other and give each other space in the frequency spectrum. Then I've got one more pad sound here, which is this big sweep. And this is basically like an effects sound, essentially. Also quite resonant. Got a bunch of reverb and delay on that. This is how it sounds in context. So it's really helping to kind of add some drama to that transition there from the break to the drop. So that's the melodic elements, and let's have a look at these vocals. Very simple vocals in this. First one is this Vox hit. So it's the same thing, just repeated. I've just used the loop brace here so that it only plays these ones, and then the darker colored, it's playing this at the end, which is like this double hit. You probably hear it better at the start here. So I basically just didn't want that double hit happening so frequently and so predictably. You can see here I've created this timing where it's basically going over a 12-bar section for most of the track. And I've got one more sound here, which I've just used the volume envelope to take out half of them, so it's happening less frequently. And again, this is just like accentuating that second downbeat, and it's really working with the groove. You know, it's kind of complementing these elements here. So the vocals in this are very, very simple, and they're really just kind of foundational groove elements. So you can see a lot of these elements, while there is quite a lot of different things going on, they are all kind of based around a simple formula, which is just basically creating this groove and then doubling down on it by creating texture and reinforcement. Now, in the effects section, for this style of track, I've got a decent amount going on. What's interesting here, we've got a crash. not that interesting, but I'm using it to add some crash fills. Some random delay here. Just accentuating this part of the track. That's a really cool thing to do at the end of the track when everything's kind of in place, is just to go through and add some send automation, almost like randomly or just in specific places, from maybe a clap here, a snare here, a percussion sound, a vocal, whatever, you know, just to kind of create these little moments and little textures. And it just kind of helps to fill out the track and make it feel a bit less predictable. We've got a reverse crash on some transitions. Simple stuff, a sweep. We've got these laser effects which kind of fit in line with the other glitchy resonant sounds. Just ear candies, really. Got this noise stutter, similar. It's just adding some texture and some interest kind of as we go through the track. You'll see, like, you know, there's always something new happening. So this kind of transitions from this first part of the break into the build. So that kind of masks the start of this snare fill, or snare roll, which is actually like a breakbeat essentially, just automating the volume on that. So it's just a different take on like a snare roll. And then I've got a more traditional snare roll coming over the top. Very nice. And a white noise riser here. And then I've got this element here called noise pump, which is essentially just a white noise. It's a long one here. And then I've just used the fades to make a shorter version. And I've put a kickstart on it to create that kind of side-chained pumping feeling. So that is how I made Oud Wood. As you can see, it's a very groove-based track. It doesn't have the prominent vocal hook that I often have in my tracks, but I have been playing it quite a bit, and it really works as like a, I would like to say, high-quality kind of filler track or transitional track. As I mentioned at the start, I will make available a pared back version of this project. It is a released track, so I'm not going to give you the whole thing, but basically like a bit of a loop with some of the key elements in there that you can kind of get in and have a little bit more of a look at. And that will be available from Patreon. Link in the description to download that. There's this and so much more over there on Patreon, so make sure you get over there and have a look. Alright guys, there you have it. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you like this track? Which is your favorite from the EP? And if you like these kind of walkthrough videos, then check out this playlist. There's a whole bunch in there. I think you're gonna like it. Alright, well that's it from me. Catch you next time. Peace.